May the odds be ever in your favor. The irony of this line is why it lingers. Everyone understands the odds were never the point. The games aren't a test of skill. They are a demonstration of what happens when the house always wins. When we navigate the massive institutions of modern life, whether it is healthcare, education, or the courts, a prolonged dispute carries a similar weight. You find yourself inside an invisible arena, bound by rules that seem detached from a fair or logical resolution. The professionals operating these systems rarely wake up intending to cause harm. Many work diligently to protect children and resolve conflict. The friction comes from the institution itself, which gradually prioritizes its own preservation over the people it was meant to serve. When a system focuses on sustaining its own existence, vulnerable people, and often children, become the quiet price society pays to keep the machine running. We naturally want to blame a mastermind. When a system produces terrible outcomes, we assume there must be a malicious villain sitting in a control room, actively plotting against us. But looking at this historical photograph of a massive typing pool, we see how systems actually operate. Institutions maintain power because thousands of ordinary individuals sit at their desks, focused on their specific compartmentalized tasks. One person processes the intake forms, another handles the scheduling, a third files the closing paperwork. This division of labor isolates every worker from the moral weight of the final outcome. If bad results are not being orchestrated by bad people, we have to stop looking for a villain. We must instead look for the architecture that dictates human behavior inside the system. We trace this behavior to institutional drift. This diagram maps how an organization's founding mission decays over time. You spot this drift by watching what gets measured. Eventually, internal metrics replace the mission, and blind rule compliance replaces an active conscience about results. In this image of a railway operator, we see a symptom of a drifting culture. The workforce stops asking if they achieve good outcomes, instead dedicating all energy simply to keeping the administrative control panel functioning. Take the family court system. It was built to protect families during crisis, but under the weight of procedural requirements and heavy caseloads, the daily operations can drift into a mechanism that prolongs conflict just to satisfy a checklist of compliance. Healthy institutions do not suddenly break down into chaotic nightmares. They fail because they work flawlessly toward the wrong priorities. The true architect of those wrong priorities is the incentive engine. This diagram represents a diagnostic tool for any institution, a simple sorting machine that dictates systemic culture by asking 3 core questions. First, what gets rewarded? Systems typically praise speed. The machine favors the worker who clears their caseload quickly and follows procedural steps without causing friction. Second, what gets punished? If a professional slows down to ensure a deep understanding of a complex case or questions whether a specific rule helps a family, they trigger institutional penalties and administrative friction. Third, what gets ignored? Often, it is the actual long-term human outcome. The trajectory of the person passing through the machine goes unmeasured once their paperwork leaves the desk. None of those incentives, speed, efficiency, standardization, are immoral on their own. They become destructive when they drift away from the organization's founding purpose. When you misalign the incentives, the culture shifts. The people the system was meant to serve are converted into the raw fuel required to keep the system running. We can measure that misalignment by looking at how an institution balances procedure and justice. Procedure dictates how decisions are made. Justice asks whether those decisions produce a fair outcome. When an organization overcorrects, that balance breaks. Procedure without justice creates a cold, unyielding bureaucracy. Justice without procedure creates unpredictability, where outcomes depend on which judge or clerk you get. The casualty of this imbalance is public trust. Budget allocations might keep the building's lights on, but trust is the actual currency that allows civilization to function. Once a system exhausts that trust, citizens become cynical, communities polarize, and even well-intentioned reforms are met with immediate, paralyzing suspicion. We are not trapped in these cycles. Institutions are constructed by human choices, which means they are not permanent laws of physics. They can be unmade and revised. Every professional inside a complex system eventually faces a quiet, defining choice. When protecting the administrative process conflicts with serving the person before you, Which one wins? In a democratic society, this image captures the counterforce to systemic decay. Hope is not passive denial. It is the active civic engagement required to force accountability, demand transparency, and rewrite toxic incentives. A machine can run perfectly on paper while leaving every participant worse off. Instead of cleared paceloads, we should measure success by the quality of the life returned to the world. A healthy system helps people flourish. The modern arena has no cameras or cheering crowds. It is built from legal filings and waiting rooms. The responsibility to see these structures for what they are and choose to change them is ours.